Cloudcast Media. Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show, amplifying the voices of social impact organizations, entrepreneurs, local nonprofits, and other community champions who shape the culture, creativity, and connectivity of San Diego. Brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union, bringing good things to San Diego for over 60 years. Learn more about what is good for you and good for all by visiting www.missionfed.com.
I'm Drew Schlosberg of Cloudcast Media, and I'm honored to have one of my longtime friends and colleagues in the studio, Martin Kruming. He's a media lawyer. He's a professor at San Diego State. He is the chairperson of the Global Neighborhood Project. He's a writer. He was the editor of the Daily Transcript and everything in between. And it's just an honor to have him. It is shocking. This is the longest running community podcast in the nation. I think I was mentioning to you before. I've been doing this since 2007 when it was called Internet Radio. You've never been on the show before. How is that even possible?
I don't know. It's an honor to be here today, and it's a wonderful program, and I enjoy it. I don't know how we've missed over the years. I mean, 40 years is a long time, Drew. But
we got 40 more to go, and so this won't be the last time that you'll be on this aspect. And we'll eventually, chat about the Global Neighborhood Project. And honored to have as my guest co-host is Kamara White. Just graduated from Mount Carmel High School. She'll be going to St. Martin's up in Washington. She'll be a communication major. You'll like that, with sports as an emphasis, and she's on a volleyball scholarship as well.
Terrific. Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So let's start with this. And you and I were chatting about it at breakfast recently. I was fascinated by the concept. What's a news desert?
A news desert is one of those communities across America or across the world that have lost their community newspaper. And in some cases, their radio or television station, but primarily newspapers. They're not only in America, but they're around the world. And they're being bought by hedge funds, private equity firms, and they're disappearing. And they're disappearing, unfortunately, at a rapid rate. So when people in a community, wherever it might be, California, Nebraska, Virginia, have lost their community newspaper. What does that mean? What's the impact? Where do they get their news? And not only national and international news, but also about what happens in their community.
So you sit there and, I'm an old grizzled newspaper guy. I'm not sure how grizzled I am, I guess. But, I started at the Encinitas Coast Dispatch way before I think, Kamara, your grandparents were born. But as a sports writer and a columnist, and the community newspaper was huge. And they still are in many communities. But some, you're right, they're not. But for, and Kamara writes for her, wrote for her school paper, correct?
Yes.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. But, Martin, and you've done it all in this area, but the community aspect of it is critical. And when you don't have that news about what's happening on the street corner or what's going on with Joe Blow or whatever, that is just critical to lose that.
I agree with you, Drew. There's a wonderful study that's been done and continuing research by a woman named Penny Abernathy, who's a professor emeritus at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And what she's done is put together a website with her research, and people can go and look, usnewsdeserts.com, and see exactly where these papers are disappearing across America or where they've gone from 3 down to 1, whatever the case might be. So one of the solutions to this is bringing in the libraries, which we've done with this project, and brought in retired journalists to take a look at this situation.
I think it's such a brilliant idea when you think about it. In some ways, librarians are journalists as they are, and you and I have talked about this. You're both lawyer and journalist, of course. But we talk about the synergy between all this. Certainly Kamara knows it. You have to ask questions. You have to be investigative. You can't be afraid to sit there and do this. But this is a great opportunity for those libraries, to revamp, especially now with the internet. Back in the day when you and I were checking out books, we had to go down and get the book, and there was a library card, and then Kamara probably doesn't remember this. I probably never had to do this, but we got fined when we were a couple days late and all that. But everything now is the internet, and that's very helpful, is it not?
Exactly. I think it's absolutely necessary today. There's an incredible amount of information, as we all know, that you can get on the internet. And you can find people who live in places like Mongolia or places like Botswana, if you ever heard of that, in Africa, as well as the United States. So the internet is invaluable and will play a major role in this project.
Right. So the news deserts, has she mapped these out, the professor in North Carolina, of where they are in the country?
Yeah, you can go to the website, which I mentioned, usnewsdeserts.com, and see exactly where they are. What the library brings to the table, and the pilot project with this involves the Coronado Library. And a librarian is trusted. You walk into a library today, and it's not only about books. It's a community center that has festivals, that has performances, that has talks by a variety of people. And so you've got the library as a very stabilizing influence, a very trusted member of the community. And then if you put that together with retired journalists covering a community, not in an investigative way, but what is fact, what is fiction, who are citizen journalists, those sort of things, and you put those two together, it's a pretty powerful formula for trying to resolve what's going on with these news deserts.
Yeah, without question. We're chatting with Martin Kruming. He's a media lawyer and professor at San Diego State. Has taught media law and other aspects of journalism. I'm Drew Schlosberg, as you're listening to another edition of Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show, now the nation's longest-running community podcast. We're in our 17th year in this beautiful Mission-Fed studio here in Scripps Ranch. Mission-Fed for more than 60 years has doing great things in the community. And Martin, I know Kamara's got a question for you regarding freedom of the press.
Yes. So what are 3 topics that you would like? Oh, no, just kidding. Describe your organization's community outreach efforts.
With the Global Project.
Yes. With the Global Project. The Global Neighborhood Project was conceived in roughly 2008, which was quite a while ago. And it happened because, actually, it was serendipity in the sense that 7 teachers from a country called Azerbaijan, which is, many people might know it, many people might not know of it. But 7 teachers from Azerbaijan came to San Diego through a project of the U.S. State Department. And they were looking for emerging leaders in this program. They're vetted in Azerbaijan, then they come to Washington for orientation, and then, in this case, these teachers came to San Diego. And one of them stayed in our neighborhood, and we said, we just like this guy, and we like him as a human being. And so when they left to go back to their capital of Baku, we wrote to the ambassador of Azerbaijan in Washington and said, "Dear Mr. Ambassador, we're a small neighborhood in San Diego, California. If you give us a neighborhood, you define the neighborhood anywhere in your country, we will work in a collaborative effort in an educational and cultural way." Well, it's now almost 15 years later.
Wow.
And we're still working. We've done over 50 projects. We're now in 10 countries that are off the beaten path, doing everything from storytelling to chess to even pickleball.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and to that point, and certainly that's what, Kamara's going to be studying up at St. Martin's in communication, and what the internet has done. It's done some very poor things, but it's done some very good things. It has brought this, person that was in your neighborhood, and now you've connected to this country, that neighborhood in that country, 10 other countries in that aspect of it, and now you bring people together. They can learn about different cultures. And Martin, you and I have talked about this ad nauseum. It's when you have an understanding of somebody you don't know, you find out that they're not really different at all. They may look different, they may speak different language, they may, have maybe different culture and all that, but we're all in it together, are we not?
I would 100% and more agree with you, Drew. Having traveled to a lot of countries, many of them off the beaten path, I think you're absolutely right. Then we start talking and breaking bread, so to speak, with people from other countries, small, large, it benefits us in so many ways. And it's the relationships, the connections, the consistency of doing it.
Well, and listen, we should need to practice this in our country, for God's sake, to say the least, and chat more, about that. Martin, I'm very much interested in this topic here. I would love to see what, Kamar's thoughts are on this. Kamar's thoughts are, and especially her being a communications manager, and do her peers talk about it. But freedom of the press. It differentiates us from folks like China and Russia and North Korea, and I'm going to go down the list. But that's something we cannot take for granted, correct?
I agree with you more than 100%, as I did previously. I think it's a very precious freedom that we've got. And I would be interested in Kamar's thoughts on this and how people like yourself, who are recent graduates of high school going on to college, what's the situation? How precious is this freedom that we have?
Being part of my school's journalism team for all 4 years, that was everything to us. And even though we were writing for a high school community, we were able to write about various topics that can be considered or deemed, controversial or taboo. But being able to have that freedom to address those topics and things that aren't talked about as much, that need to be addressed in order to plant seeds into people's brains about certain issues, it creates a voice for people, and it's just a stepping stone to creating change on bigger social issues. So.
Yeah, do you see it now? You guys in journalism, and you guys love freedom of the press, obviously.
Absolutely.
But how about the general population of Mount Carmel? Do they know? Sometimes you don't know how precious a freedom is until you lose it and go, "What? Yeah. I didn't realize that." Do you get the sense they also valued it too, even though they weren't in journalism? Yeah,
I would say so. Just even being in the classroom and just being able to talk about anything. Right. I definitely, yeah.
Right. And, it's funny because, kids in this country are just shocked when they find out you can't do this in another country. Adults can't talk about it, or else you'll be sent to some, far-along place. One of the things I wanted to ask, Kamara, and then want Martin to weigh in on it. We used to do, when I was running community and public relations for the Union Tribune, we did a lot of group tours. And some were from classrooms like Mount Carmel, some were senior groups, some whatever. But in recent years, the term fake news came up a lot. That never came up when I was going to school as a journalist. I'm not sure if it did when you were in journalism, Martin, but it certainly has come up probably since the 2016 election. And that's because certain people use that term when they disagree with something, and they call it fake. What do you think about that? The term fake news, and are people just saying it because they disagree with the news, and then if they disagree with it, they call things fake?
I think that, at least from my generation, I definitely would agree they would use that term just for disagreeing. I think that just goes back to, we grew up with the media, and so we believe whatever's being fed to us as a teen, young generation. And obviously it's different for people who didn't grow up with internet and media, and they can differentiate the two, what's fabricated and what's not. But yeah, I think that teens definitely would use the term fake news. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Martin, you teach journalism at San Diego State. We come back from break. I want to talk a little bit about this. Do you bring up fake news? Do you find out that some of your students should be reading more? We all know that a way to be good journalists is to read, and so forth. Now, whether you're reading it from the internet, you're reading it from a novel, you're reading from magazines at all. So I want to address that as well. And then can't wait to talk to you, Martin. What we did at breakfast is that case with Fox News and Dominion, with talk about freedom of the press and mainly media law. When we return with Martin Kruming, media lawyer, a professor, former editor, all-around good guy, tennis player, and so forth, and Global Neighborhood Project chairman. And to find out more of his insights, I'm Drew Schlosberg, as you're listening to another edition of Drew Schlosberg's Spotlight on the Community Show, the nation's longest-running community podcast, now in our 17th year in these wonderful mission-fed studios and Scripps Ranch. Mission Fed has been a terrific community partner for more than 60 years. Honored to have sitting next to me my guest co-host, Kamara White. She is from Mount Carmel High School, just graduated, will be a freshman at St. Martin's College in Washington State, volleyball scholarship, and a communications manager. Looking forward to hearing more of her insights when we return after this break.
When you do your banking with Mission Fed, you get great rates on auto and home loans. That's good for you, but something good also happens for a lot of other people. We're not for profit, so we put money back into the community to help lots of great nonprofits to keep San Diego strong. So you're not just getting something good, you're doing something good. Come to Mission Fed. It's banking that's good for all.
Brand amplification is the DNA of Cloudcast Media, and our code is the powerful blending of sound, voice, and storytelling to lift local brands and their communities. Whether it is our Brandcast, Schoolcast, or Causecast platforms, the unifying ethos is all about this community, the one you call home. If you dare to dream and want to explore the brand amplification of Cloudcast, a national leader in local podcasting and other Winfluence strategies, please visit us at cloudcast.us.
I'm Drew Schlosberg of Cloudcast Media, and you're listening to another edition of Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show, the nation's longest-running community podcast. We're now in our 17th year, broadcasting from the Mission Fed studios in Scripps Ranch and Mission Federal Credit Union. Phenomenal community supporter for more than 60 years, joined by Martin Kruming, media lawyer, professor at San Diego State, former editor of newspapers here in San Diego. He is the chairman of the Global Neighborhood Project and does so many cool things with students and with neighborhoods and the media. We're going to jump into a case that was just settled not too long ago. I can't wait to get his opinions on it. I'm joined by my guest co-host, Kamara White. She is from graduate of Mount Carmel High School in Rancho Penasquitos, will be attending St. Martin's College in Washington State on a volleyball scholarship. But the connection to Martin is she's going to be a journalist as well, wants to focus on sports journalism. So Martin, maybe you can give just a little bit of a background on the Fox News settlement with Dominion.
Well, Dominion Systems, as most people know, was involved in the most recent presidential elections and brought a lawsuit, a defamation lawsuit, which means that they disparaged their reputation, brought a lawsuit against Fox. And it became quite a contentious lawsuit. And a lot of money was spent on both sides litigating this. And eventually it was settled. And to the tune of many millions of dollars.
$900 million.
And everybody went their way, but did they go their way? And what impact did it have on Fox? What impact did it have on people like Tucker Carlson, who left the network? and moved over to social media. And it's an interesting case because it attracted a lot of attention from journalists, from lawyers, from ordinary people in this country and around the world, because Fox is a global corporation.
And what's so interesting about it, Kamara, from a journalism standpoint, and as a journalism student many years ago, and then a practicing journalist, and then working for the newspaper in public relations, I was talking to Martin about this and a lot of my friends, that defamation is a really hard bar to prove. And you've got to have some unbelievable facts behind it, and someone who's got to really mess up to defame someone, especially organizations that are in the public eye. Now, while Dominion is a voting, company, voting booths or voting, products and all that business, and machines, so to speak, but they were pretty well known because of the votes and all that. Well, because the anchors at Fox News, the well-known anchors, and also the chairperson, Robert Murdoch, said on air, or behind air, I should say, that was taped, that, listen, Trump, what's he doing this for? He shouldn't be doing these things. This is a joke that he's attacking these folks. And the fact that it was recorded, and then they come on air and they don't admit that, and then they start attacking Dominion. You're a media lawyer. That hit the defamation category, did it not?
It certainly did. At least when the lawsuit was filed, I guess like every lawsuit, you don't know where that is going to go. You don't know how it's going to end up. But it caused a great deal of public reaction. And I would assume people at Mount Carmel, in the journalism school and elsewhere, were talking about this case.
Yeah, so, the defamation, now when you guys, with your journalism teachers at Mount Carmel, and you'll be finding this out when you go to St. Martin's, do you talk about libel and defamation?
Yes. It's introduced to when we're first starting on the team. It talks about here and there, but I wish it was talked about more, a lot more.
Well, I mean, like I said, it's a hard bar to do. And, pretty much every lawyer I talk to, and journalist who understands media law, knew that there's no way Fox could win this because they were dead to the rights, because they had admitted, behind the scenes that this is just a joke, that they're going after Dominion. And then what do? Now they go after Dominion. So they knowingly disparaged them. And that was the bar they hit, correct?
Well, I think in terms of the outcome, you go into a situation thinking you have a slam dunk, let's say, and things happen. And sometimes those slam dunks don't become what you think they might become. So people thought this was going to trial. But many people also thought that this was going to settle.
That's right. Because
there are too many facts against Fox. There's too much on the table, and there's too much money being spent on this.
Well, there's much was discussed that if they're foolish enough to go to trial, they're going to be spending a lot more than $900 million in damages, okay, because they were caught, doing this stuff. And I think to the point we're trying to make camera on this, I'm just always fascinated by this stuff, especially being in, journalism, and then loved it my media law classes that I had at San Diego State, is it's tough when you do this, because you have to have a pretty high bar. Public figures, when they're out there, media companies can take some pretty good shots at them, even some slanderous stuff. Now, they'll lose some of these, but for the most part, they're a public figure, and that's what you got to put up with. But I think this was, Martin, probably one of the most influential cases we've had since Times versus Sullivan in '64.
Yeah, I think Times versus Sullivan, as you mentioned, is one of the premier cases in the media law arena, and it's been around since 1964. 60
years.
I've got a case, or not a case, but a course at San Diego State that I taught last spring, will teach this fall, called CNN, Fox, and More. And you can believe that this case will be talked about in the class with the students this fall. And it's a course that looks at journalism, the media around the world. In the case of the China and Russia, etc. And I think of an individual, Wall Street Journal reporter, who is right now sitting in a prison in Russia. And you talk about press freedom. Take a look at the people who are involved in these cases, in this issue.
Well, listen, and we've read enough about Kamara, what's happening down south of the border, how many journalists have been slain in Tijuana area and south of that. Just horrible. Drug cartel, I'm sure it had something to do with this. And it's such a precious freedom, and that's why I was so glad that you were coming in, because I know what your major is, and then talking to Martin on it. We need more, and maybe you can address this, Martin, and we want to get comrades thinking on this. We need more comrades out there, do we not?
Most definitely. I think the opportunities for young people, let's say going off to college or graduating from college, are varied. I mean, you can go in so many different directions today. Yeah. But the main element, I think, is to be ethical, to be legal, to be a good storyteller, and have some fun when you're doing this. And what are your thoughts? You know, what should a journalist be? Come on.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, first off the bat, educated. Know your stuff. But yeah, I agree with you, having fun, but also telling the story in a way that, with an angle that can provide perspective for people, and whatever, if you're backing up something, if you're defending something, just backing it up with facts, and not necessarily an argument, just a perspective for people to understand and just think about. I think, for me at least, that's what
I love what you said about educated. Mm-hmm. You and I have talked about that before. There's probably a different type of journalism student than when I was going to school a long time ago. And you hit something that's really, really critical. How do you report on something if you don't read about something, you don't ask questions about something, you don't become a voracious learner about those different types of things? Well, good for you on that. Do you see yourself, Kamara, maybe you can make some insights into this too, Martin, being more on the investigative side of journalism, or more on just the reporting of news on it? There's some great investigative sports journalists.
I would definitely say investigative. There's so much stuff that if you don't ask, you won't know, or if you don't look for, no one would know. I think this, for me, that gives me, that's what I love about journalism, just learning new things, interviewing people, asking them questions, and learning things that if you didn't ask those questions, that no one would really know. So
yeah, without question. And as Martin knows, and how many years have you been teaching journalism now?
Probably about 30 to 35.
35 years.
I'm guessing.
Right. Yeah, maybe a little more. But but listen, I think no matter what, these are still the principles of journalism. You want to be fair and balanced. That doesn't change. Okay, you want to do as many facts as you can and back the statements up with facts. Obviously, there's opinion pieces. Fine, that's your opinion and all that. That should never change with all this. Question for you, Kamara. How much do you use social media in your reporting, or is it only on the print side?
Mm-hmm. Definitely print side. I know that social media provides so much information, but in this day and age, at least, there's a lot of just fabricated things. So, yeah.
Right. And how much has that been a tough nut for your students to get their hands around, Martin?
Well, I'll put a question, or show you a question that I put to the students, and ask them whether they'd heard about Watergate. Kamara, have you heard about Watergate?
It rings a bell, but I don't think I know too much about it.
And I think you're not unusual. Mm-hmm. And I think a generation different from ours, Drew, doesn't know about Watergate.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But history is very important, as we all know. And how do you make that exciting and make it worthwhile to study?
Well, I think you're spot on that. We're chatting with Martin Kruming. He's a media lawyer, a professor at San Diego State in journalism, the chairman of the Global Neighborhood Project, former editor of the Daily Transcript. I'm Drew Schlosberg. You're listening to another edition of Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show, the nation's longest running community podcast here at Mission Fed Studio, joined by my guest co-host, Kamara White. She'll be a freshman at St. Martin's College in Washington, and journalism major. You know, that's interesting you brought that up. Did you follow, Kamara, I'm putting her on the spot here now, the January 6th, telecast of findings and all that business that was really led by Dick Cheney's, daughter in this aspect of it? And the reason why I say that, it was all about the insurrection. Did you follow that at all?
No, I did not.
Yeah, and the reason why it's so tied to Watergate, it was very Watergate-like. Watergate were the hearings where eventually caused President Nixon to resign. Yes. Because of, he was doing some stuff illicit. He was lying about it. There was obstruction of justice. But literally, when you fast forward, to this year when they had the hearings, fascinating. And a lot of folks that are older, like Martin and I, because I was 19 years old when Watergate hearings were out, and we watched them all the time. And if you fast forward to this, it was a great connection to it. That's a good point. So maybe you can Google Watergate and take a look at it, and then put that side by side by January 6th. Martin, for our listeners out there, I want to switch back to the Global Neighborhood Project or to News Deserts, either one of those. How can they support this great work you're doing?
I think the primary thing is to be aware of who we are and what we do. And they can get in touch with me simply by email me, Martin, Martin, at Kruming, Kruming.com. And I'll get back to you. We have been very low-key, intentionally, but we've built this over 15 years. And if you want to get involved, there are plenty of ways to do it.
Very good. And if you are at San Diego State and you want to have a great professor and always be on your toes, take Martin Kruming's class at all. Any final comments, Martin?
I've enjoyed it. I think, Kamara, I wish you the best of luck. And you've chosen a wonderful career and an important career that's going to affect a lot of people here and abroad.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions for Martin?
No, I am just absorbing everything that you guys are talking about.
Well, good. We'll get you Martin's contact info. He'd be a good person for you to connect with. And ask questions. And Martin, just what he said, you email him, he'll email you back. We've been chatting with Martin Kruming, a media lawyer, professor at San Diego State, editor of newspapers. He's a chairman of a global neighborhood project, and just been doing wonderful things in this community for many, many years, and many more to come. Very interesting about news deserts. I know this is the last time, not the last time we'll talk about that, Martin, as well. I'm Drew Schlosberg, and you've been listening to another edition of Drew Schlosberg Spotlight on the Community Show, brought to you by Cloudcast Media. Enjoyed chatting with my guest co-host, Kamara White, who will be going to St. Martin's College as a communications major in Washington. We hope you enjoyed the program.
You've been listening to an episode of Drew Schlosberg's Spotlight on the Community Show, amplifying the voices of social impact organizations, entrepreneurs, local nonprofits, and other community champions who shape the culture, creativity, and connectivity of San Diego community. Brought to you by Mission Fed Credit Union, bringing good things to San Diego for over 60 years. Learn more about what is good for you and good for all by visiting www.missionfed.com.
Cloudcast Media.